Chicago in late summer had a way of holding its breath just before evening. Heat rising from pavement, gold light scattering across skyscraper glass, and music drifting from open windows in neighborhoods where stories lived in every brick. The city felt alive, a restless heart beating beneath steel and sky. Naomi Carter loved this hour most of all. She stood outside the Community Arts Center, her hands still smudged with paint from the afternoon's workshop. Children had left chalk drawings across the sidewalk. Dragons, flowers, crooked suns. But Naomi saw beauty in every curved line. Her work wasn't just teaching, it was planting things. Confidence, imagination, a sense of belonging in kids who didn't always feel they had any. She took a breath, letting the soft breeze carry the scent of basil from the urban garden nearby. Evening was settling, warm and generous. Behind her, a door opened. "Excuse me," a voice said, deep and gentle. "Are you Naomi Carter?" She turned. The man before her looked like he didn't quite belong in this part of the city, or perhaps he didn't yet know how to belong. His tailored shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms that suggested he knew how to do real work, despite the expensive fabric. Sun-sharp hair, pale against the darker city backdrop, eyes the color of rain-soaked slate. He looked like someone who had grown up in quiet rooms with glass walls. "Yes," Naomi said, wiping her hands on a cloth. "And you are?" "Elias Arden." He hesitated before offering a small smile. "My family's company is sponsoring the new arts program here. I came to see how things were going, but I'm starting to think you're the one doing the sponsoring. Your work is extraordinary." Naomi laughed softly, not in dismissal, but in disbelief at the unexpected sincerity. "Children do the extraordinary part," she replied. "I just hand them the brushes." He watched her as though studying a language he was only just beginning to understand. Around them, the city moved. Buses groaning down streets, teenagers weaving through crosswalks, the echo of basketballs striking concrete in the nearby park. But somehow, in that moment, it felt quiet. Elias cleared his throat, a faint nervousness revealing itself. "I'd like to learn more about your program. Beyond what's written in any report, would you walk with me for a moment?" Naomi tilted her head, studying him now. She had known men who admired from afar, who performed kindness, who wanted to feel generous rather than be generous. Elias did not feel like those men. There was something restrained in him, something heavy he carried carefully, as though he feared it might spill out and reveal him entirely. "Yes," she said softly. "Sure, let's walk." They crossed the street together, falling into step as naturally as breath and heartbeat. The sky deepened to amber, the clouds streaked in lavender and burnt rose. Chicago's elevated tracks rattled overhead, sending vibrations through metal, through air, through ribs. "Were you always an artist?" Elias asked. Naomi smiled at the memory. "No. I grew up in a neighborhood where art was something you stole time for, something you guarded. I didn't realize it could be a life until I was already building one." "And now you help others find theirs," Elias said. It wasn't a compliment, it was understanding. She looked at him again, really looked. Beneath the polished restraint was a man tired of being sculpted into something he did not choose. A man whose life had been charted before he ever had a say. "You seem like someone who wants to be free of something," she said quietly. Elias stopped walking. The city kept moving around them, but the air hushed. "You're right," he said. "I just haven't figured out how to be." Naomi didn't touch him, but the space between them felt warm, like hands without contact, like an invitation without pressure. "You will," she said. "Maybe your story just hasn't found its turning point yet." His breath caught, a small, private reaction. And without planning it, without knowing it would matter, they shared a silence that felt like the beginning of something that had been waiting for years to arrive. A jazz melody floated through an open cafe door nearby. Naomi smiled and gestured with her chin. "You like music?" Elias exhaled a soft, almost relieved laugh. "I'd like anything, if you're the one who shows it to me." They stepped inside, together. "If you felt something here, if this moment stirred even a small spark in your heart, your presence matters more than you know. Stories grow through the people who hold them. So if you're here, let us know. A simple "I'm here" in the comments, a like, a follow. It lets the story continue. It lets us continue together. The first snowfall of the season arrived early that year, settling over Chicago like a quiet confession. It softened the edges of buildings and rooftops, muted the restless rhythm of the city, and carried with it the strange hush of something beginning. Elias and Naomi walked side by side down a narrow street lined with brownstones and winter-bare trees. They had fallen into a rhythm without ever discussing it, meeting after Naomi's classes ended, sharing late lunches, then wandering wherever the evening carried them. Not dates exactly, not yet, but something that lived in the space between friendship and longing. No words had been spoken about what hovered beneath their conversations, yet the unspoken was always present, warm, patient, growing. Tonight, Naomi held a paper cup of hot cocoa, steam curling like ribbons from its surface. Elias held coffee he barely remembered ordering. He was watching her again, not in the obvious way men watched beauty, but in the way a poet watches light through stained glass, trying to understand how something ordinary becomes art. "You're staring," Naomi said, not accusing, just aware. Elias blinked, sheepish. "I didn't mean to." "You don't have to apologize," she smiled, tipping her chin toward him. "Just say what's on your mind." He exhaled, breath mixing with winter air. "I like the way you see the world. Like everything holds meaning if you look at it long enough." Naomi took a slow sip. "Maybe it does." They continued walking, boots pressing soft prints into fresh snow. A jazz trio played in a small courtyard behind fogged cafe windows. Low velvet sound. The music trailed after them like memory. "How was your day?" Elias asked. Naomi shrugged lightly. "Beautiful. Exhausting. A 12-year-old tried to convince me that glitter should count as serious creative medium. I told him to prove it. He did. Now my classroom sparkles permanently." Elias laughed and the sound startled him. It had been so long since joy came easily. He stopped walking. Naomi paused too, turning toward him. There were words he had been circling for weeks, but tonight, the city seemed to hold the moment gently in its palm, offering him the courage to speak. "I feel different with you," he said quietly, "like I am allowed to be something other than what I was trained to be." Naomi studied him, her eyes warm but steady. "Tell me what you were trained to be." "A successor, a symbol, a continuation of someone else's story." His voice never rose, but each word carried weight. "I grew up in a house where every emotion had to be contained, where speaking honestly was an indulgence, and wanting anything for myself was considered irresponsible." Naomi's breath softened. "That sounds lonely." "It is." He looked up as snow drifted across the lamplight. Soft, fleeting, luminous. "But when I'm with you, I don't feel trapped inside the life I inherited. I feel," he paused, searching, "human. Like the world is something I can shape, not something pressing down on me." Naomi didn't answer immediately. She stepped closer instead, close enough that her breath warmed the cold space between them. "You don't have to be what anyone expects," she said, "not even for me." Elias looked at her then, really looked. Naomi's beauty was not delicate. It was grounded, lived in, a beauty with history and truth and the courage to stand exactly where it stood. She carried herself like someone who had learned to stay soft in a world that tried to harden her. "Everyone has expectations," Elias murmured. "Yes." Naomi's voice was a whisper of warmth. "But love, real love, is not one of them. It's a choice, a gentle one." The silence that followed was not empty. It swelled around them, full and bright and quietly electric. The air itself seemed to lean closer. And then Elias did something he had not done in years. Not in boardrooms, not among colleagues, not even in the tight orbit of family obligation. He let himself want. "Can I hold your hand?" he asked. The question was simple, but sincerity made it sacred. Naomi's eyes shone, surprise, tenderness, and something like joy. "Yes," she said, "you can." Their hands fit easily, like threads woven into the same tapestry, long before either of them understood what was being created. They walked on, fingers intertwined, warmth spreading through both of them despite the cold. The streetlights glowed like constellations mapped at eye level. The snow fell like blessings. Their love did not arrive as an explosion. Two lives, once separate, now beginning to tilt toward a shared horizon. And though neither spoke the word love, not yet, they both felt it. Not as promise, as inevitability. They did not rush. They did not need to. The city's snow kept falling, quiet as breath, quiet as hope. And in that drifting silence, a new story began to take shape, one both of them would fight to keep, though neither yet knew the cost fate would soon ask of them. Winter deepened, drawing long shadows across the Arden estate, an expanse of glass, stone, and whispered lineage standing at the northern edge of Chicago. Snow lay smooth across the grounds, undisturbed except for the faint tracks of a solitary car pulling up to the entrance. Naomi had never been inside a place like this. She smoothed the sleeve of her wool coat, not to impress. She was not a woman who bent herself to fit the room she entered, but to steady the faint tremor of anticipation. Elias had asked her to meet him for dinner here, a casual suggestion, spoken with affection instead of caution. Yet she recognized the unspoken significance. A threshold was being crossed. A world was being stepped into. Before she knocked, the door opened. Victoria Arden stood framed in the doorway like an oil portrait come to life. Tall, immaculate, composed. Her hair was silver blonde, swept back with precise elegance, and her eyes held the cool, assessing clarity of a woman accustomed to influence and to being obeyed. "Naomi Carter," she said, not a greeting so much as an acknowledgement of fact. "Come inside." Elias is delayed. Naomi hesitated only a breath before stepping in. Warmth wrapped around her, firelight, expensive wood polish, and the faintest scent of jasmine tea. The estate was beautiful, but its beauty did not invite. It displayed. They walked to a sitting room where floor-to-ceiling windows opened toward the winter-dim garden. Victoria gestured to a velvet chair opposite her own. Naomi sat, posture steady, chin unbowed. For a moment, the only sound was the low crackle of the fireplace. Victoria studied her the way a scholar might study a foreign text, examining structure before meaning. "You work with children," she began, stirring her tea without drinking it. "You teach them art, encouragement, self-expression, admirable pursuits, though not practical ones." Naomi met her gaze calmly. "Practicality is not the only measure of value." "No," Victoria agreed, "but it is the measure of survival." The words fell with the softness of falling snow and the sharpness of ice beneath it. Naomi understood then. This was not conversation. It was assessment, line drawing, territory marking. "You love my son," Victoria said, not as a question. Naomi did not flinch. "I do. And he loves me." A faint smile touched Victoria's lips, not approval, merely acknowledgement of a predictable response. "Love," she murmured, almost gently, "such a delicate, fleeting force. Beautiful in youth, destructive in proximity to power." Naomi held still. "Your son is not an empire. He is a person." Victoria's eyes sharpened, not with anger, but with something colder, pity. "Elias is both," she said, "and he does not have the freedom to separate them. The Arden legacy is not a personal narrative. It is an inheritance of responsibility, shaped over generations. Your presence threatens that continuity." Naomi inhaled slowly. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Continuity built on the erosion of someone's humanity is not legacy. It is bondage. It was the first time Victoria's expression shifted. Just a trace, a nearly imperceptible tightening around the eyes. "You are intelligent," she said softly, "and sincere. These are not flaws, but sincerity does not withstand the weight of dynasties. I have seen love burn through families like wildfire." Naomi felt her pulse, steady but strong, heart answering heart. Even across the future she could not yet see. "I am not here to break your family," she said, "only to love your son the way he deserves to be loved." Victoria leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, elegance coiled like a blade. "And what you deserve?" she asked. The question hung, sharp and glimmering. Naomi let the silence answer, because love, when true, needs no justification. But Victoria was not a woman who yielded to silence. "There is still time," she said, voice low, finally revealing the intention that had been circling between them like a hidden current. "Walk away from him. Now, quietly, dignity intact. I will ensure your future is comfortable, secure." Naomi felt the air still, the weight of meaning settling like snowfall on branches. So this was the shape of the warning, Not cruelty, not threat. Power disguised as generosity. I do not need your security, Naomi replied, or your permission. Victoria studied her again, but now with something sharper than assessment, recognition. You are not easily moved, she said. That makes you dangerous. Naomi rose, the warmth of the fire at her back, the winter cold pressing at the windows, her voice steady as the ground beneath her feet. No, she said, it makes me real. And Elias deserves something real. Footsteps sounded in the hallway, familiar, warm, carrying the soft cadence of the man whose name had become a quiet echo beneath her ribs. Elias entered the room, smiling when he saw her. Naomi and Victoria did not look away from one another. Something had been spoken between them that no one else would ever hear. Something that would change everything that followed. Not prophecy, not threat, a promise. Snow continued to fall over Chicago, though winter had shifted from its glittering novelty into a deeper, quieter cold. Days shortened, evenings stretched long, and the city lights glowed softer, like embers instead of flame. In that hush, Naomi and Elias had begun to weave the outlines of a shared life, small threads of intimacy forming the early tapestry of love. They cooked dinner together in her small apartment, mismatched pans, chipped coffee mugs, laughter filling the spaces where doubt had once lived. Elias learned the names of every child in her art program. Naomi traced gentle fingers over the lines of his tired hands, hands that had signed contracts and inherited burdens he never asked for. They were building something steady, honest, unaffected by the world outside. But the world outside had not forgotten them. Naomi received the message on a Wednesday afternoon, simple, polite, unsettling in its clarity. Victoria Arden requests your presence. Private car will arrive at 7 p.m. There were no threats in the words. None were needed. Naomi did not tell Elias, not because she meant to keep secrets, but because she recognized the battlefield before her and understood that some steps must be taken alone. At exactly 7, a black sedan pulled to the curb outside the art center. Naomi entered without hesitation. Snow swirled past the tinted windows as the car moved north, returning her to the estate she had seen only once before, but remembered as clearly as any scar. Victoria was waiting in the conservatory this time, surrounded by winter roses, blossoms kept alive against all reason, fed by warmth and artificial sunlight. Beauty maintained through control. Naomi, Victoria said, voice warm enough to be mistaken for kindness. Thank you for coming. Naomi approached, stopping just short of the marble table where Victoria sat. No tea today, no pretense of hospitality. The air between them was crisp and precise, like the clean edge of a blade. You could have asked to speak to me directly, Naomi said. Victoria's smile suggested amusement. And risk Elias becoming involved? I think we both understand this conversation requires clarity, not sentiment. She opened a leather case resting on the table. Inside was a contract, thick pages bound by a ribbon, and a cashier's check. $2 million. The numbers sat in the artificial light like a frozen star. Naomi did not move. Victoria spoke with the calm of someone conducting business, not altering lives. This is freedom, she said. Financial independence, security, a future untouched by the demands of legacy. Take this and leave Chicago tonight. You will be able to work anywhere, live anywhere. No one will trouble you. Naomi's voice, when it came, was quiet. And Elias? He will believe you chose to leave, Victoria answered. He will hurt, yes. But hurt fades. Ambition remains. He will recover. He is built to recover. Naomi felt that sentence like a cold hand closing around her ribs. Victoria leaned forward, elbows resting on the table, the winter roses at her back like silent witnesses. Naomi, my son feels deeply, too deeply. You awaken a part of him that will not serve him in the world he must lead. Love is a luxury he cannot afford. And you, her gaze sharpened, though her tone did not. You are a woman of heart, compassion, fire, but you are not of our world. And the world does not bend for love. It consumes it. Naomi held her stare. What you call love a weakness, I call it humanity. And humanity, Victoria replied, is a liability in power. For a moment, neither spoke. The snow outside pressed its silence against the glass. Naomi lifted her chin. You believe that love threatens him. I believe that love is the only thing that could save him. Victoria's expression did not change, but something colder, more ancient, flickered behind her composed exterior. If you stay, she said, Elias will lose everything he has been raised to inherit. I will ensure it. Naomi's breath caught, not from fear but from the terrible certainty in the words. Victoria was not offering money. She was offering bloodless ruin, not rage, not violence, strategy. Naomi understood, in that moment, what it meant to love a man born into a dynasty. His world was not built of affection, it was built of sacrifice. And she saw now the shape of the sacrifice Victoria was demanding of her. Naomi closed the leather case gently, returning the check and contract to their place. I am not taking your money, she said. Victoria nodded once, as though she had expected nothing less. You love him, she said. It was not a question. Yes, Naomi answered. And because you love him, Victoria murmured, you will learn what love costs. Naomi left the estate without looking back. The snow was falling harder now, the night winds sharp enough to steal breath. She walked into the cold with her coat pulled tight, her heart pounding like a drum, calling an army she did not yet know she would need. She did not tell Elias what had happened. She held him that night as though holding time itself. But something had shifted. Love had found its first shadow, and the darkness had only just begun to gather. The cold settled deeper as January unfolded, sharp, unyielding, the kind of winter that made the city seem carved from ice and steel. But inside Naomi's apartment, warmth held steady. Light from a single lamp washed the room in soft amber as she and Elias shared a quiet evening, the kind that required no words to feel full. He had fallen asleep on her couch, one arm curved behind his head, his breathing slow and unguarded. Naomi sat close beside him, sketchbook resting on her knees, her pencil moving gently across the page. She wasn't trying to capture his likeness exactly, just the softness of him, the way his features relaxed when no one demanded anything from him. She loved him most in these moments, not as heir, not as symbol, just as a man whose heart had finally been allowed to rest. A small flutter moved in her abdomen. She stilled. It happened again, soft, unmistakable, like the faintest brush of wings. Her breath caught. She set the pencil down and pressed her hand to her stomach, her eyes widening, filling, shining. Life, a quiet, impossible, miraculous life. She closed her eyes, letting a trembling smile break across her face. A warmth spread through her. Not fear, not confusion, something deeper, sacred. The future shifted in that instant. The world opened. She wanted to wake Elias, to tell him, to see his face, to watch that restrained composure dissolve into wonder. But something held her still. A memory. Victoria's voice, because you love him, you will learn what love costs. A shadow moved across her warmth. But Naomi did not allow it to take hold. Not yet. Tonight was theirs. She leaned down, pressing the lightest kiss to Elias's temple. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow, she would tell him. But tomorrow never arrived the way she imagined. It began with celebration. Elias had arranged for them to attend a winter gala, a fundraiser for the very arts program Naomi helped build. A night meant to honor her work, to bring attention to the children she taught. He held her hand as he guided her through the entrance, cameras flashing for him, not for her. Yet he stayed near her, grounding her in every step. She felt radiant, hopeful, already shaping the words she planned to share with him later, when they were alone beneath warm blankets and soft morning light. But the world does not always wait for love to reveal itself. Fate intervenes in silence. It was after midnight when they returned to her street. The snow had stopped, leaving the night clear, sharp, echoing. They walked slowly, not wanting the evening to end. Elias kissed her goodnight at the building door, a long, lingering kiss that carried the promise of 1,000 more. Tomorrow, she whispered. He smiled. Tomorrow. She watched him disappear down the sidewalk, his breath turning to silver mist beneath the street lamps, his silhouette shrinking into darkness and distance. Naomi turned, still smiling, keys in her hand. She did not see the figures move from the shadows. A hand pressed over her mouth. Arms like iron locked around her. A sharp chemical scent filled her lungs. Her keys clattered to the ice. The world blurred, darkened. tilted. The last thing she saw was the smear of her own reflection in a car window, distorted, fading. When consciousness returned, it came slowly. Cold concrete beneath her, faint metallic light overhead, a distant mechanical hum. Her wrists were bound, not cruelly but efficiently, a detail that spoke of planning, precision. Footsteps approached. A man crouched before her, his expression unreadable. Hard lines shaped by discipline, not rage. He was not eager. He was not careless. He was simply doing a job. "My name is Michael," he said. "We're going to talk calmly. If you stay calm, no harm will come to you. Do you understand?" Naomi swallowed, forcing her breath steady. "Yes." He nodded, as though this confirmed something about her character. "Good." For a moment, silence. Then, "You're pregnant." The words hit harder than the concrete floor. Naomi's breath shook. She did not speak. "That complicates things," Michael continued. "Not cruel, just factual. The original plan was final, but your condition changes the directive." Naomi closed her eyes, understanding dawning like a storm unfurling. "Victoria, this was the cost." Michael's voice lowered, not unkindly. "There are two options now." Naomi's pulse thundered in her ears. "One," he said, "you disappear. Completely. New name, new city, no contact. Ever." He paused. "Two, there is no option two." Naomi's chest tightened until she could no longer draw breath. Her mind raced through every memory of Elias. His laughter, his exhaustion, his vulnerability when he thought no one watched. The child's faint flutter echoed beneath her ribs. She whispered, barely audible, "He must never know I was taken." Michael's expression flickered. Surprise, then respect. "You want him to believe you left by choice." Naomi nodded, tears burning but unshed. "Hate is easier to heal than grief," she said. Michael lowered his gaze. He understood. He stood, signaling to the others in the shadows. The decision had been made. Naomi Carter would vanish, not because she was weak, but because love, when true, sometimes steps into darkness. So the one who is loved may remain in the light. The night closed around her, and nothing would ever be the same again. Naomi sat upright on a narrow cot in a dimly lit storage facility, the kind used for holding freight before it crossed state lines. The air was cold, cold in a way that seeped into bone rather than skin. A single industrial bulb hung low overhead, flickering every few seconds, casting sharp-edged shadows that stretched and recoiled like restless spirits. She no longer struggled. She conserved strength the way a flame conserves warmth in winter. Her hands rested over her abdomen, fingers trembling just enough to betray what her face no longer could, the weight of what was being asked of her. Life pulsed there, fragile yet undeniable. A promise written in the language of heartbeats. The metal door clanged open. Michael Hale stepped inside. He did not look at her with cruelty, but neither did he carry regret. He was a man accustomed to enacting decisions made far above his reach. "You've had time to think," he said simply. Naomi lifted her gaze. Her eyes were calm but not resigned. There was a steadiness there, like the quiet held by old trees weathering winter storms. "Yes," she said. Michael waited. He did not push. He already knew her answer, but he understood the gravity of her speaking it aloud. Naomi exhaled slowly. Her voice was soft, but it held the full weight of the life she refused to abandon. "I will leave," she said. "I'll disappear. I'll take the new name, the new life. I will not contact Elias again." There was no tremor in the words, only grief so profound it had transformed into stillness. Michael nodded, as though acknowledging a vow. "We need to make it convincing," he told her. But Naomi was already ahead of him. "He has to believe I wanted to go," she whispered. "He has to believe I didn't love him enough to stay." Michael's gaze tightened, not with judgment, but with recognition of the kind of sacrifice that should never have to exist. "You understand that if he believes you were taken from him," he said quietly, "he will tear the world apart to find you. He will burn through his family, his legacy, everything he has ever known." Naomi closed her eyes. Yes, she knew that. The love she shared with Elias was not small. It was not soft. It was something that could move stone, crash walls, shift courses of lives and lineages. It was a force, quiet perhaps, but unstoppable. If he knew she had been stolen from him, Elias would become a storm that nothing could contain, and Victoria would destroy him for it, piece by piece, silently, cleanly. Naomi opened her eyes. "I will not let Elias lose himself to grief or vengeance," she said. "If I must be his wound, let it be one that heals." Michael's jaw set. He did not nod this time, but something in his stance shifted, like the smallest bow to a truth too sacred for speech. She swallowed, voice barely audible. "Tell me what I have to do." The instructions were simple, cruel only in their precision. A letter written in her handwriting, describing a need to reclaim her independence, to pursue a life that did not belong to him. A few of her belongings left behind, just enough to reflect haste, not abduction. A trail of credit card charges leading toward the West Coast. A life ending in silence. And then, a life beginning elsewhere. Michael placed a blank sheet of paper and pen in front of her. No pressure, no direction. The choice had already been made. Naomi stared at the page, her hand hovered. "How do you write your own absence?" She wrote slowly, not because the words were difficult, but because each one was a severing of something she cherished. When she finished, she folded the letter carefully. She did not cry. Tears belonged to those who still believed there was something left to save. Days passed in movement, long drives through unfamiliar landscapes, motels with buzzing lights, meals eaten without taste. The city changed from industrial steel to open plains, from plains to mountains, from mountains to quiet evergreen forests where rain fell like whispers. Through it all, one truth remained unwavering. She carried Elias's child. Hope, wrapped in sorrow. Love, wrapped in exile. When they reached Portland, a small apartment awaited her. Modest, clean, overlooking a street lined with maple trees. A new name sat waiting on a table. Maya Brooks. She touched the passport, the state ID, the rental agreement. Naomi Carter had vanished. Maya Brooks inhaled for the first time. Michael stood at the doorway, his coat already on, ready to disappear as silently as he had arrived. "If you ever try to contact him," he said, "not as threat, but as reminder, everything you sacrificed will be undone." Maya nodded. She understood. He hesitated, just long enough that she realized he was leaving behind something more than orders. "I'm sorry," he said. It was the closest he could come to grace. The door closed. Silence filled the room. The child moved again, gentle, small, alive. Maya pressed her hand over her belly, leaned her forehead against the window, and let the quiet night hold her. Outside, rain fell in a slow, steady rhythm, like a lullaby, like a promise, like the beginning of a story she would one day tell, when the world was safe again. The morning Naomi did not return, the world did not shatter all at once. It fractured quietly, like the faint crack of ice forming beneath a layer of snow. A sound almost gentle, almost ignorable, until the break becomes too deep to repair. Elias woke expecting the warmth of her presence, the scent of paint on her clothes, the softness of her laughter before words formed. But the apartment was still. The air held no trace of her footsteps. The silence was wrong, too clean, too absolute. He tried calling, once, twice, 20 times. No answer. At first, there was concern, then unease, then something darker, something that rippled like cold water down his spine. He found the letter on her kitchen counter, folded, neat, deliberate. He knew her handwriting. He knew her voice shaped into ink. He had watched her write poems in the margins of receipts, sketch the curve of his jaw absent-mindedly across cafe napkins. Each stroke of her pen was familiar, but this letter felt foreign, hollow, a shape without a pulse. He read it once, then again, and again. Each word was a blade. "I need space. I need my own life back. I can't do this anymore. You deserve someone who wants your world, and I don't. Please don't contact me." The script was precise, but the rhythm was wrong. Naomi's sentences breathed. These did not. They were too clean, too final. He stood in the kitchen until the coffee pot finished boiling and burned itself out. He didn't remember sitting down. The apartment walls closed in around him, not with noise but with silence. That was the worst part. The silence that felt like absence wearing a body. Hours passed, or minutes, or days. Time loosened its threads. His hands shook only once, when he placed the letter down. After that, he held himself carefully. as though any movement too sudden might break what little remained. He went to her studio. The chalk drawings were still on the floor. The scent of paint thinner hung in the air. He touched one of her brushes, bristles stiff from drying overnight. A life paused mid-breath. A love interrupted without explanation. At the Arden corporate headquarters, the day marched on as though nothing had changed. Phones rang. Documents passed. Deals were signed. Futures were calibrated. Elias moved through the corridors like a man underwater. His colleagues noticed the difference, though they could not name it. His steps were precise, but without warmth. His voice calm, but without resonance. He no longer paused to breathe between decisions. There was no need. Breathing was for the living. Victoria watched him in silence from across a boardroom, her posture regal, her expression unreadable. But behind her eyes there was the faintest flicker, recognition of a wound successfully inflicted. Not triumph, not relief, simply confirmation. Her son had returned to the shape she believed the world required of him. Untethered, unsoftened, alone. At night, Elias walked the city streets. He traced the paths they had taken together, through snow-dusted sidewalks, past cafes where jazz spilled into the cold, across bridges where lights shimmered like fallen stars on river water. He stopped at the art center door more than once. He never went in. The children asked for Naomi for weeks, then months. Eventually, they stopped asking. Children heal more quickly than adults, but they never forget. They just learn to hold memory without pain. Elias envied them. His grief did not scream. It settled into him like winter, quiet, heavy, relentless. One evening, he found himself in the same jazz cafe where Naomi had once laughed at something he couldn't even remember now. The music washed over him, warm, golden notes rising and falling like breath. He sat alone, not because there wasn't room for others, but because every chair beside him still belonged to her. The pianist played a slow, aching blues. Elias closed his eyes. He saw her smile. He heard her voice. He felt the ghost of her hand in his. But when he opened his eyes, he saw only the condensation slipping down his glass. There is a kind of love that fills every corner of the spirit, so quietly that you do not realize how deeply it has rooted itself until the day it is gone. And when it goes, it leaves behind not emptiness, but echo, a long, resonant echo that shapes everything that comes after. Elias did not love again. Not truly, not deeply, for many years. He tried. He learned to smile when necessary, to converse, to engage, to appear whole. The world saw a man composed, capable, unshaken. But inside him, winter lived on. Not bitter, not broken, just quiet. And Naomi, her laughter, her warmth, her fierce, gentle love, remained the single point of color in a life that had faded into gray. He carried her like breath. Not visible, but essential. The world believed Naomi Carter had walked away from him. Only Elias knew something had ended that night, but something else had begun. A wound that would not close. A story unfinished. A future he could not yet see. The man left behind did not know it, but the world had already begun preparing the moment they would meet again. Spring arrived gently in Portland, the kind of spring that did not announce itself with blossoms or color, but with the slow thaw of air and the faint smell of wet earth. Rain moved softly across the city, washing sidewalks and rooflines until everything looked new, though nothing had truly changed. Maya Brooks, who had once been Naomi Carter, watched it from the window of her small apartment. Her hands rested on her belly, rounder now, her body reshaping itself around the quiet miracle growing within. The city outside did not know her name. That anonymity was both mercy and wound. She had built a life before, warm, rooted, luminous, and now she was starting again inside the soft gray light of a city that did not ask questions. Every morning she walked to a small cafe at the corner of Hawthorne, where the smell of roasted beans and cinnamon felt like home without memory. The barista learned her name quickly, Maya. The name tasted strange at first, like wearing clothes tailored for someone else, but each day the syllables settled a little deeper into her, until she no longer flinched when she heard it spoken aloud. She painted again, small canvases at first, shapes before meaning, color before form. She did not paint faces, not yet. She didn't trust herself to look directly at what she had lost. But her hands remembered softness. Her heart remembered light, whether she wished them to or not. The night the twins were born, the rain came hard, sheets of silver rushing down the hospital windows. The storm outside matched the storm inside her. Pain, breath, fear, love, everything breaking open at once. Two cries erupted into the room, one strong and clear, one soft and searching. A boy and a girl, Noah and Lila. She held them both, one against each shoulder, their small bodies warm and damp with newness. She did not think. She did not speak. She simply breathed them in. Two pieces of her heart she had believed she might never be allowed to keep. Their eyes were closed, but she knew they saw her. They knew her. Her tears fell silently into their soft curls. Not grief, not joy, something larger than either. A love that was no longer gentle or abstract. A love that was survival. A love that would rebuild a world. Those early years unfolded slowly, like leaves unfurling in morning light. Maya's days were consumed by bottles, lullabies, first steps across wooden floors, small hands pressing paint onto canvas with delighted abandon. Noah grew quiet and observant, his gaze thoughtful, already absorbing the world with a depth that felt older than his years. He would sit beside Maya while she painted, his little fingers resting on her knee, watching every movement of the brush as though it mattered deeply. Lila was made of motion, bright laughter, wild curls, fists full of flowers, songs without melody but full of life. She danced in circles whenever the rain fell, arms open as if greeting an old friend. Between them, Maya relearned how to live. Motherhood did not heal her, but it gave her a reason to grow around the wound. She taught classes again, part-time at a small community center. Children came to her with stories written in color and chaos. She listened, she encouraged, she gave back what the world had once given her, a place to become. But late at night, when the twins slept in the room beside hers, she would sit at the small kitchen table and let memory rise like mist. Elias, his laughter, his hand in hers, the life they had almost shaped together. She grieved him in silence, grief without anger, only longing, slow and enduring, the kind that reshapes a person without breaking them. She did not speak his name aloud, but she carried him, the same way one carries a first language, buried but never erased. Years passed. Portland grew around her, and she grew with it. Maya Brooks became known, not by name alone, but by effect. She organized art programs in neighborhoods where children had been taught to shrink themselves. She painted murals across city walls, murals that breathed color into forgotten brick. Her work carried warmth, defiance, tenderness. People began to follow it, and quietly, steadily, a new identity emerged. Not borrowed, not assigned, chosen. Maya no longer lived in the shadow of who she had been, but she did not forget. Some loves are not eras, they are architecture, foundations beneath everything built afterward. One evening, as the sun fell in streaks of pink across the city, Maya stood in the doorway of her home, watching Noah and Lila chase each other through the garden, their laughter lifting into the cooling air. She touched the doorframe. She touched her heart. She did not say his name. She didn't need to. What remained of him lived in their smiles, their quiet, their wonder. The life she now guarded had cost her everything she once believed she could not lose. But in the softness of twilight, surrounded by the two small souls she had crossed worlds to protect, Maya began to understand. She had not vanished. She had transformed. And this was not exile. It was rebirth. Slow, hard, sacred. Time moved the way rivers do, slow on the surface, unstoppable underneath. The twins grew, and with them, so did Maya. Not back into Naomi, not into the woman she once was, but into someone shaped by loss and love, by purpose and quiet resolve. Years passed, 5, then 7, then nearly 12. Portland became home, not a refuge anymore, but a creation, a place she had built with her own hands. Noah had become thoughtful and contemplative, a mind always turning. He could spend hours taking apart radios, clocks, any machine he could find, studying the way each silent piece worked with the next. He was gentle by nature, yet his insights carried sharpness, a clarity beyond his age. Lila was light, movement, fire. She loved stories, voices, laughter. She filled rooms simply by entering them. A child who made the world feel wider just by looking at it. Their mother was their constant, not fragile, not faded, steady. And yet, in quiet moments, something still tightened behind Maya's ribs, something that had never fully softened. The knowledge that somewhere, miles and years away, Elias walked through a life she had once been meant to share. But grief had learned to be quiet, and love had learned to become memory. It might have remained that way, soft, bearable, unspoken, if not for what came next. One crisp autumn evening, Maya stood before a mural she had spent the summer painting. 20 feet tall, splashed across the side of an old brick warehouse. It showed children rising into color, stepping out of grayscale into warmth. The community had gathered to celebrate its completion. But something pulled at her. A conversation overheard at the edges of the crowd. A company, Arden Global, was in negotiations with the city. Their project would displace dozens of families and close the very community center she had come to call her second home. The name was a blow to her chest, not because she feared being discovered, but because it meant the life she had left behind was reaching for her, even unknowingly. She could have walked away. A quieter life would have let it happen. But the woman she had become, the mother, the teacher, the builder of safe haven, did not walk away. That night, after the twins had fallen asleep, Maya sat at her kitchen table beneath a single golden lamp and opened her laptop. She began to read city contracts, public records, environmental reports, investment portfolios, legal petitions. Private board statements leaked through channels most people didn't know how to find. One file led to another, one thread to another, and slowly she began to see. The proposed development was not just a business expansion, it was a displacement machine, a restructuring disguised as progress. A calculated move that would quiet working-class neighborhoods, erase histories, silence cultures, and replace them with polished buildings meant for people who had never walked these streets. Maya leaned back, her breath steady. She understood now. She was not just an artist, she was a witness. And a witness, once aware, must decide whether to speak. She returned to the community center, not as a teacher, but as someone preparing to defend. She listened to stories of families who risked losing everything. She sat in back rooms with organizers, lawyers, activists. At first, she was quiet, listening, learning. But when she finally spoke, her voice carried weight, not loud, but anchored, like truth spoken from the marrow. You don't lose a neighborhood in a single day, she said. You lose it by accepting silence one day at a time. They listened, because she did not speak like someone fighting for an idea. She spoke like someone fighting for a life. Soon, Maya was no longer just the woman who painted murals. She was the woman leading meetings, drafting petitions, speaking in city hearings, and writing investigative columns that began circulating far beyond Portland. Her articles were measured, elegant, fierce in their clarity. She did not attack, she exposed. The public read her words, and whisper by whisper, murmurs grew into voices. Her writing found its way into state newspapers, then regional networks, then investigative platforms that reached Chicago, New York, Boston. People learned her name. Maya Brooks became a force, not loud, not brutal, but undeniable. One evening after a long meeting, Noah found her sitting in their small backyard beneath the maple tree, the late summer light fading soft and blue. He sat beside her quietly, his shoulder pressing against hers. "You're fighting for them," he said. Maya smiled with tired tenderness. "I'm fighting for all of us." Noah leaned his head against her arm. "Does it hurt?" "Yes," she admitted, "but some things are worth hurting for." He nodded, small, thoughtful, already carrying an understanding children should not have to bear. "Will we be okay?" he asked. Maya looked out across the garden, Lila chasing fireflies in the dimming light, laughter floating like song. "Yes," she said, "because we don't run from the world. We shape it." The wind moved through the trees. The night deepened. The stars blinked awake, one by one. Maya Brooks, once Naomi Carter, lifted her chin. She was no longer a woman hiding from her past. She was a woman building a future and learning, at last, to fight. Time had a way of shaping children without announcing its progress. One day, They were small enough to fit beneath their mother's chin when she carried them. The next, they were slipping into adolescence, voices changing, strides lengthening, questions deepening into something heavier than curiosity. Noah and Lila were 12 when the world they knew began to shift. It began with a school trip. Their class had been selected to visit Chicago for a National Youth Arts Showcase. Dozens of students from across the country had contributed paintings, sculptures, poetry, performance pieces. Noah's kinetic sculpture and Lila's mural had both been chosen. The honor felt monumental. Maya was proud, proud beyond words. But beneath her joy, there was a tremor of something she refused to name, because Chicago was the city she had once called home, a city that now held a silence built of choices and loss. But her children had earned their moment, and she would never deprive them of what they had fought for. So she kissed them goodbye at the airport, Noah's quiet solemnity beneath her palms, Lila's arms thrown fiercely around her neck, and watched them disappear past security, their backpacks bouncing with excitement. The flight was direct. The hotel was modest. The week was carefully chaperoned. No danger, no reason for fear. Yet fate does not require intention, only timing. The showcase took place in the towering lobby of Arden Global Headquarters, a partnership arranged to highlight youth arts and corporate philanthropy. The irony of the venue meant nothing to the teachers and students, but the moment the building's name was spoken aloud, something in Noah stilled. Arden, a word like a shadow across water, familiar in a way he could not place. The lobby was bright marble and polished glass, sunlight pouring down from a skylight 5 stories high. Children's artwork lined the walls, vibrant colors breathing life into the clean geometry of wealth. Noah and Lila walked side by side, identical steps though they had never practiced it. Lila pressed her nose to a display case. "It looks like the future in here." Noah didn't answer. He was watching a reflection, not his own, but that of a man stepping from an elevator across the room. Tall, composed, shoulders carrying something he could not name, hair like pale ash under the skylight, eyes like gray-blue rain. The world around Noah blurred, not in shock, not in fear, but in recognition so deep it felt primal. The man turned. Their gazes met. For a flicker of a second, time did not move. Lila's hand slipped into Noah's, unaware of what held him still. "Noah, are you okay?" He did not answer. He barely breathed, because the man staring back at them looked like him, not in the way of simple resemblance, in the way of origin, in the way of truth. Elias Arden had not expected to attend the showcase. His calendar was full. Meetings, calls. The architecture of his life had long been designed to minimize unpredictable intersections. But something, an instinct, a pull, a pressure beneath his ribs, had led him downstairs. And when he saw them, 2 children standing in the glow of his family's empire, a boy with his eyes, a girl with Naomi's fire, the world did not shatter. It simply became clear. He took a step forward. The room felt suddenly weighted. Not heavy, just real. Lila blinked, unaware of the seismic shift occurring beside her. Noah, however, stood very still, his breath shallow, his body rigid with understanding he was too young to carry, but too awake to deny. Elias stopped a few feet away, not imposing, not looming, simply present. "Your artwork is remarkable," he said softly, directing the words to both of them, but his gaze, gentle, searching, rested on Noah. Lila lit up at the compliment. "Thank you. Mine is the mural with the birds. His is the sculpture that actually turns. Everyone's been asking how he did it, but he won't tell anyone because he says artists don't reveal secrets." Elias smiled faintly, the kind of smile someone wears when a memory rises from the dead, not painful, but alive. He looked at Noah again. "What's your name?" "Noah," the boy answered, quiet, steady, as if speaking from a place far beneath the surface. Elias nodded slowly. "And your mother?" The question was gentle, but it landed like thunder. Noah knew the answer he should give, but the answer he felt rose anyway. "Maya Brooks." Elias's breath left him, not like shock, but like a truth he had been waiting for without knowing he was waiting. Naomi had lived. Naomi had left. Naomi had. He didn't finish the thought, because Noah was still looking at him, holding eye contact with a courage that felt inherited. Lila tugged Noah's arm. "We should go back, the group." But Noah didn't move. He only said softly, to the man whose face mirrored his own. "You know her, don't you?" The words were a revelation spoken aloud, not accusation, not plea, just truth. Elias closed his eyes, not to escape, but to steady the ground beneath him. When he opened them again, his voice was quiet. "Yes," he said, "I knew her, and I never stopped." Noah's fingers tightened around Lila's. The world felt different now, not broken, just changed. A story once buried had begun to rise, and none of them, not the man, not the boy, not the girl, could ever return to what came before. Rain swept across Portland the evening the twins returned home. The door opened with a burst of laughter, Lila spilling stories, Noah quieter but watchful, carrying something in his silence. Maya met them with open arms, drawing them close the way she had from their first breath. But as her cheek brushed Noah's temple, she felt it. He was holding something he did not know how to say. Later, when Lila had fallen asleep with airport bracelets still around her wrist, Noah stood in the doorway of the hallway, his face half-shadowed. "Mom," he said, voice steady with effort, "we need to talk." Maya's heart tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. She had always known this moment would come. She had counted the years in borrowed time. She nodded once. "Tell me." He sat beside her on the couch. Rain threaded silver down the windows. The house seemed to hold its breath. "We saw him," Noah whispered. Maya closed her eyes. No denial, no shock, only inevitability. "Your father," she said. Noah looked at her, young but no longer a child. "You knew we would, didn't you?" "I hoped you wouldn't," she answered. "But yes." He studied her then, not as a son seeking comfort, but as a person seeking truth. And Maya understood. This was not just about Elias. This was about identity, about belonging, about the shape of a story half told. "Why did you leave him?" Noah asked. Maya inhaled slowly. The answer was not a single sentence. It was a tapestry of fear and love and power and sacrifice. But she began where truth began. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving him." The words fell gently, like rain. "I left because loving him would have destroyed him, and us." Noah's eyes flickered, something like hurt and understanding warring beneath the surface. Maya told him everything, not with drama, not with bitterness, but with the quiet precision of memory. The threat, the offer, the abduction, the forced disappearance, the choice to let Elias believe she had walked away, rather than be hunted like a ghost through the ruins of his family's empire. She spoke of Victoria Arden, not as villain, but as power, sharp-edged and absolute. Noah listened without interrupting. His hands were still, his breath controlled, but his eyes burned, not with hatred, but with an ancient kind of grief. When she finished, the room felt heavier, not darker, just full. "So he never stopped loving you," Noah said softly. "Love isn't something you can bury," Maya answered. "You only learn to walk with its weight." A long silence. Then Noah spoke the words she feared most. "We need to go back." Maya's breath caught. "No," she said, "it isn't safe. The world he comes from is not a world we can simply enter." "You didn't hear him," Noah whispered. "The way he said your name, without saying it." Maya looked away. She didn't need to hear it. She had heard it every day in silence. Noah continued, voice growing steadier, sharper, a reflection of bloodlines he had never known he carried. "You taught us to fight for what matters, to face truth when we find it, to not run." Maya felt her own teachings turn back toward her like a mirror. She had raised them to be brave, but bravery asks a price. She closed her eyes, letting breath settle into her bones. When she opened them, tears shone unshed, but her voice did not waver. "If we return," she said, "we return not as ghosts, not as apology, not as reunion." Noah nodded. "We return as truth." Lila's sleepy voice drifted from the hallway. She had awoken, listening. "And as family," she added, stepping into the room, hair tangled from dreams. Maya looked at her children, both hers, both his. The rain outside slowed to a soft patter, like the city itself was listening. She felt something shift inside her, something deep, something still, something that had once been broken, but had mended in new, stronger shapes. Not the girl who ran, not the woman who hid, but the mother who had built a life from nothing and would now defend it. She rose. The room was quiet. The decision was not spoken aloud, but it had been made. Chicago looked different when she saw it again, not because the skyline had changed, but because she was no longer returning as the woman who left. She walked through the Arden Global lobby with her children beside her. No trembling, no fear, only presence. The elevator doors opened to the executive floor. Glass walls, steel lines, a skyline of winter light. Elias stood at the far end of the room. He turned, and time, long, heavy, aching time folded. He did not move at first. His breath shuddered, not with surprise, but with recognition so powerful it felt like grief and joy held in the same heartbeat. Maya, he said, her name, not Naomi, but the name she had earned. She stepped forward. The twins stood between them, not dividing, but connecting. The past did not speak. The future did not rush. The present held. Elias swallowed hard, voice barely a whisper. You're here. Maya answered softly, steady as dawn. We're here. No forgiveness yet. No explanation. No resolution. Just truth, finally returned to its beginning. Silence settled first. Not a cold silence, just a silence full of everything that had never been said. Elias stood facing Maya, and for a moment, he looked like a man who had been walking through winter for 12 years and had just now seen the first sign of spring. His breath trembled, not because he was weak, but because something inside him had been locked away for so long that its awakening felt like pain. Maya held his gaze, not as the woman who once loved him without fear, not as the woman who disappeared, but as the woman who had survived the impossible. Their children stood at their sides, the living proof of what had been lost and what had been protected. Elias's voice came first, quiet, shaped carefully as though he feared it might break. You were alive all this time. Not accusation, not relief, just truth spoken like a prayer in a wound. Maya nodded. Yes. He closed his eyes once, slowly, as if bracing against the memory of every night he had spent searching for the version of her that could still be spoken to. Why? He asked, not with anger but with the desperation of a man asking how the ground disappeared beneath him. Maya did not flinch, because what she was about to say was not cruelty. It was the deepest, rawest truth she carried. Because if you had known I was taken from you, she said softly, you would have burned the world to find me. A breath, sharp, quiet, left him, and your mother would have destroyed you for it. The room shifted, not physically, but in the way gravity shifts when a planet changes orbit. Elias's face did not contort, did not crack, but a stillness entered him. A stillness that did not belong to calm, but to devastation held with dignity. My mother, he said, as though testing the shape of the words in a reality he had never allowed himself to consider. My mother did this? Maya looked at him the way one looks at someone they have never stopped loving, even when it hurt. She believed she was protecting you, protecting your inheritance, your future, your legacy. Her voice was gentle but unwavering, but she did it by taking mine. Lila stepped forward, small, fierce flame in human form, her voice quiet but unwavering. She chose power over us. Noah remained still, but his jaw tightened the slightest bit, the same way Elias's did when containing emotion. Elias looked at his children, seeing them not just as possibility, but as years stolen. Years of first steps, first words, scraped knees, laughter that should have belonged to him. He pressed a hand to his mouth, not to hide, but to hold himself together long enough to breathe. Do you know what it is, he whispered, to grieve someone who is still alive? Maya's eyes shone. Every day, their grief fit together too perfectly to have been coincidence. It was the shape of a shared wound. Elias stepped closer, not touching her, not claiming, not pleading, just closing the distance time had carved. I would have chosen you, he said, every time, in every version of my life. Maya swallowed, her voice breaking in the barest fraction. And I would have let you lose everything. A single tear slipped down his cheek, not dramatic, not aching, just true. You thought I was better off surviving without you, he said. She nodded. And I was wrong, she whispered, not as apology, as realization, because she saw him now, not the heir, not the carefully raised vessel of legacy, but the man she remembered beneath all of it. A man who had lived half alive for 12 years. Elias exhaled a shuddering breath. What do we do now? He asked, not as surrender but as invitation. Maya looked around the room, the glass walls, the polished floor, the skyline that had once belonged to another life. "This isn't something we solve in one conversation," she said. "This is a story we have to unearth slowly, carefully, together." Noah stepped forward, voice quiet but certain. "But the truth has to come first." And Elias understood. The truth was not a knife. It was fire. It would burn away the lies, and whatever survived that flame would finally be real. He nodded once, not to Maya, not to the children, but to himself. "I will speak to her," he said. The room seemed to inhale. Maya's voice softened. "You won't be the same man when you walk out of that conversation." Elias met her gaze. "I haven't been that man since the day I lost you." No more was said. No more needed to be. They stood there, 4 lives connected by love, loss, and a truth that could no longer be buried. Outside, the winter light shifted, not warm, but brighter, and somewhere in the city, power stirred, because the reckoning had begun. Elias did not knock when he entered his mother's private office. He simply walked in, the way a son always had the right to, but this time, it was not as a son. Victoria Arden looked up from her desk, pen poised between her fingers. She was as composed as ever, every hair smooth, every movement controlled, every breath measured. But something in her eyes flickered when she saw him. Not fear, recognition. Something had changed. "You look tired," she observed, as though commenting on the weather. "I saw her," Elias said. There was no need for a name. The silence that followed was clean and sharp as glass. Victoria set her pen down with deliberate care. "I had hoped you would never know." Elias stepped forward, not aggressive, not fragile, simply present in a way he had not been in years. "You stole 12 years of my life." His voice was quiet, steady. 12 years with the woman I loved. 12 years with my children. If he had shouted, she would have dismissed it. If he had broken, she would have softened and then rebuilt him her way. But he did neither. He stood calm, and that frightened her more than any fury could have. "I protected you," she replied, rising from her chair. "You were vulnerable. You loved recklessly. You were willing to throw away everything our family has built." Elias cut her off with a single, controlled breath. "What we built," he said, "was a cage." Victoria's jaw tensed. "Legacy is not a cage, it is responsibility." "And what is love?" Elias asked. "A liability," Victoria answered without hesitation. There it was, the heart of her, the wound that made her, the truth that had shaped everything. Elias nodded once, the movement almost tender. "I used to believe you," he said, "but now I see it. You don't protect love, because you've never trusted it to stay." Something in Victoria's expression fractured, so subtly that only a son who had studied her his entire life would see it. A crack where memory lived. Loss lived there too, something she had lost long before him. But tragedy did not excuse cruelty. "You won't destroy me with sentiment," she said, voice like polished steel, the crack resealed. "You cannot undo what has been built. You cannot change what you are." "No," Elias agreed, "but I can choose what I become." He placed a folder on her desk. Documents, financial reports, board filings, internal memos, evidence. Her breath stilled. "You've been investigating me." "Not you," he said, "your actions." The difference matters. For the first time, she looked older, not weaker. "Human." "Elias," she said carefully, "if this goes public, the company will collapse. Everything we've built, your future, will vanish." He thought of Naomi, Maya now, standing in a Portland apartment whispering lullabies to children he had not known existed. He thought of her walking into that building again, not with fear, but with truth. He thought of the love he had locked behind glass to survive. "If a future requires destroying the people I love," he said, "then it is a future I never wanted." Victoria closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her gaze was not cold. It was wounded. "You don't understand what the world will do to you," she whispered. "To them. I have seen love make princes weak and powerful women disappear. I refuse to let that happen to you." "You refuse to let me choose," he replied. He stepped back. "I speak to the board at 9 a.m. tomorrow. You should be there." Victoria did not call after him. She did not command him to stop. She simply watched him leave and understood, for the first time, that she had truly lost. The boardroom was silent when Elias finished speaking the next day. His voice measured, his evidence clear, His proposal, decisive. Victoria Arden would step down. The Arden Empire would restructure. Community investment would replace displacement. Transparency would replace shadow. No theatrics, no violence, no spectacle, just truth, undeniable and clean. Some board members resisted, others relented. But the tide had shifted, and power bends to momentum. The motion passed. Victoria did not look at her son. She looked at the city instead. The skyline she had once believed she controlled. Slowly, she stood. No tears. No apology. Warriors do not apologize when they lose. They simply walk from the battlefield. And she did. Dignity unbroken. Legacy undone. Outside, the winter wind carried the sound of distant sirens and pigeons fluttering against cold stone. Elias stepped into the street. Maya was waiting there. Not triumph in her eyes. Not relief. Just knowing. He exhaled. She stepped closer. And for the first time in 12 years, they touched. Not as ghosts of what could have been, but as people who had survived everything it took to find their way back to the same ground. Not lovers reborn. Not yet, but two lives finally walking toward truth instead of running from it. It did not happen with headlines. It did not happen with shouting or spectacle. The fall of the Arden dynasty began quietly, like a great building losing its foundation grain by grain. Not loud, not dramatic, inevitable. Victoria Arden withdrew from the world with the precision of someone dismantling their own monument brick by brick. First, she stepped down from the board. Then she resigned from every public advisory seat. Then the press releases began. Calm, dignified, opaque. Retirement, health concerns, private matters. The world accepted the story. But those who had lived inside her gravity felt the shift more deeply. The Arden headquarters changed. The hallways, once hushed with an invisible authority that seemed to whisper legacy, now felt open, lighter. The air no longer carried the silent rule of a single, unyielding will. Elias did not claim her office. He left it untouched, the door closed. Some doors are not meant to be reopened, not out of fear, but out of respect for what they once held and what they cost. Instead, he moved to a smaller room overlooking the river. He worked not to command the empire he inherited, but to reshape its purpose. Projects paused. Contracts renegotiated. Community meetings scheduled. People were surprised, not by his competence, but by the gentleness he brought to power. He spoke softly. He listened carefully. He did not rush. A dynasty was not being rebuilt. It was being transformed. Meanwhile, across the city, Maya and the twins adjusted to the delicate gravity of return. No longer hiding, but not yet rooted. They stayed in a modest townhouse in a neighborhood of old brick buildings and broad, quiet streets. For the first time in 12 years, Maya slept without fearing that someone would come for what she loved. She woke slowly each morning, the light touching her face gently instead of sharply. Noah took to the city quietly, learning its rhythm. He watched people, not buildings. He saw how power changed the way others walked. He saw how silence could say more than words. Lila, in contrast, embraced the city with open arms. She spoke to everyone, elderly neighbors, bus drivers, vendors at the farmer's market. Her laughter warmed the air. Maya watched them both and felt a truth settle in her. They were not made fragile by what had happened. They were made luminous. But healing was not the same as closure. There was still one truth that had not yet been spoken. Elias and Maya met often in quiet places. In the botanical garden where winter flowers persisted. In cafes near the river where steam curled upward like memory. In the courtyard of the art center they had once walked past arm in arm. There was no rush to return to what they were. They were different now. Older, weathered, soft in new places, scarred in others. Their conversations unfolded slowly. What still hurt, what had survived, what they feared, what they were learning to hope for again. One evening, beneath a sky stained gold and lavender, Elias finally asked, "Do you still love me?" He didn't ask with expectation. He asked like a man placing his heart gently on a table. No armor, no defense. Maya didn't answer immediately. She looked at him, not as the man she remembered, nor as the man she had mourned, but as the man standing in front of her now. "I never unloved you," she said, "but love doesn't return in the same form it left." Elias nodded. He understood. Love could die and be reborn, but rebirth was its own becoming. The world outside watched carefully. Corporations circled, waiting for Arden Global to break. Investors speculated. Journalists wrote cautious headlines. Competitors smelled opportunity, but they underestimated something. Victoria Arden had built an empire of fear. Elias was building one of trust. Slowly, edges softened. Policies changed. Workers who had once felt invisible were seen again. The dynasty did not collapse. It shed its skin. As for Victoria, she moved to a house outside Lake Forest, an estate smaller than the one she once ruled, but still elegant, still ordered. She tended her garden of winter roses. She spoke to few. She hosted no dinners. Her silence was not punishment. It was reflection. One afternoon, she received a letter, unmarked, simple, no return address. She recognized the handwriting immediately. It did not accuse. It did not condemn. It simply said, "Your son learned love in spite of you, not because you tried to prevent it, but because some things are too strong to kill." Victoria closed her eyes. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel something she had denied for decades. Regret. Not as apology, but as truth. And so a dynasty fell. Not with rupture, but with relinquishing. Not to ruin, but to change. The past was not erased. It was acknowledged. And in its wake lay the quiet, trembling possibility of something new. Spring returned to Chicago, as though the city itself had decided to inhale again. The river thawed, the air softened, and light poured across rooftops with the quiet promise of renewal. It was not dramatic, not triumphant, simply gentle. A season that arrived with patience, much like healing. Maya stood on the balcony of the townhouse one early morning, watching the sky pale from rose to gold. The city below hummed with slow, waking life. Delivery trucks, morning joggers, the distant echo of the L train. She wrapped her hands around a warm mug and breathed deeply, letting the cool breeze press soft against her face. The past year had unfolded like careful restoration. No sweeping gestures, no sudden transformations, just steady repair. Noah was taller now, his curiosity sharpened into confidence. He spent afternoons with Elias in the workshop, fingers stained with graphite and oil, learning the language of mechanism and invention. They spoke quietly, comfortably, two mirrors discovering they had always been reflections of one another. Lila found her place in color. She painted murals across the city, walls blooming with birds, galaxies, hands reaching for one another across distance. Strangers began to recognize her work. Galleries began to ask questions. She laughed through most of it, not because she took it lightly, but because joy came naturally to her. Bright, unashamed, unguarded. And Maya, she had begun to paint again, not for escape, not for survival, for expression. Her canvases now held layers of life, scars and tenderness, storms and dawns. Museums had begun to ask for her work. She said yes only when she wanted to. Her art no longer belonged to necessity. It belonged to choice. As for Elias, he did not ask for forgiveness. He earned understanding. He worked beside communities instead of above them. He moved quietly, thoughtfully. The Arden name became something new, not a symbol of dominance, but of restoration. Some people resisted the change. Some embraced it. But progress did not need to please everyone. It only needed to continue. There were days when he and Maya simply walked, through gardens, along the lake, through neighborhoods layered with memory. They did not rush toward what they once were. They were building something different now, something grown rather than returned to. They were not trying to reclaim the past. They were learning how to create a future. One evening, the four of them sat together in a small park overlooking the river. Lanterns glowed along the walking path. The water shimmered beneath them, pulling city lights into soft, shifting shapes. Lila leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. Noah sat cross-legged in the grass, thoughtful as always. Elias turned toward Maya, the question in his eyes soft, not uncertain, just open. Not, "Do you love me?" They both already knew that answer. The new question was quieter, braver. "Are we ready?" Maya's hand found his, not with urgency, with certainty. "We begin here," she said. Not back where they were broken, not where they were forced apart, not in the shadow of what was lost. Here, in the world they had chosen for themselves. The wind moved across the river. The trees rustled like soft applause. The city breathed around them. alive, imperfect, full of possibility. Lila laughed, sudden and bright, pointing to the sky where the first star had appeared. Noah smiled, rare and precious. Elias exhaled slowly, as though releasing the last of a 12-year winter. Maya felt her heart expand, not with intensity, but with peace. This was not a fairy tale ending. It was something far more real, a beginning. And for anyone listening to their story now, anyone who has held love in their hands and feared losing it, anyone who has walked through silence, grief, or exile, anyone who has carried a truth too heavy to speak, their story leaves a gentle reminder. Some things are not destroyed by separation. Some things endure. Some things wait for us to return when we are strong enough to carry them. Love is not always a rescue. Sometimes it is the rebuilding. Sometimes it is the choosing, again and again. If this story touched your heart, even for just a moment, let the world know you were here. Like, comment, share, follow. Your voice keeps stories like this alive. Your presence tells this story that it mattered.